You have walked through fire and shadows, yet emerged with vision sharper than ever before. This is not just awareness, it's a revelation, a gift that strips away illusions and leaves only the essence of what truly is. That surge you feel isn't random, it's the undeniable force of perception expanding beyond boundaries. Every mask around you trembles when you step into the space, because facades are powerless under your gaze. No polished performance, no hollow story, no rehearsed charm can withstand the weight of your presence. They sense it instantly, the trembling recognition that their disguises are paper-thin before your clarity. What feels like sudden lightning has, in truth, been forming for ages. Each strange silence, each broken link, each unexplained distance was not rejection but initiation. The universe has been chiseling your awareness, moment by moment, until your sight became unclouded. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership, it's your calling. Think back to the one who avoided your calls when you stopped feeding their endless cycle of self-doubt. Recall the acquaintance who drifted away once you refused to play their endless drama. These were not accidents, but stepping stones laid deliberately in your path, teaching you strength through detachment. The same applies to those who fled when your questions touched their contradictions. They weren't prepared for the mirror you held up to their carefully guarded stories. Their vanishing was not loss, it was confirmation that your presence commands honesty, even if it empties the room. All of these threads, scattered across time, weave into a larger design. They were rehearsals, training you to carry the weight of truth, to stand in the tension of exposed pretenses, and to breathe freely in the face of discomfort that others couldn't handle. Now, as your awareness anchors itself fully, the field is different. You are no longer deciphering pieces, you are inhabiting the whole picture. What once felt confusing now feels inevitable. This isn't the end of a game, it's the unveiling of a stage where only reality remains, and you stand at the center, unshakable. You are the kind of soul whose clarity unsettles those who would rather remain hidden in their illusions. Your words do not cut like a sword, they resonate like a bell, impossible to ignore once struck. When you finally speak, the silence that follows is heavier than any argument could ever be, because truth has a way of rearranging the air itself. It was only recently that the repetition became undeniable. Different faces, different stories, yet all carrying the same startled reaction the moment you refused to bend your voice. Like echoes traveling through different valleys, their responses revealed how deeply your presence exposes what they worked so hard to disguise. One encounter stood out like a storm breaking. The mask of certainty slipped from someone who once thought themselves untouchable. In the span of a few breaths, you watched the tide shift, arrogance dissolving into the uneasy recognition that you had been mapping their inconsistencies far longer than they realized. It wasn't about a single word spoken in haste, it was about the tapestry of contradictions you had quietly cataloged over time. A glance from last season, a phrase from years back, an omission repeated too often, all of it forming a picture too sharp to deny. Their collapse wasn't caused by your confrontation but by the weight of their own history finally being mirrored back at them. Not long after, a different understanding settled within you. For so long you poured yourself into others, convinced that generosity was always a noble thing. Energy, time, even the pieces of your own heart were handed over without hesitation, as though the giving itself was proof of love and strength. But as your sight grew clearer, so did the patterns in those exchanges. The ones who took most readily were also the ones whose hands were always empty when yours were outstretched. What once felt like kindness began to reveal itself as a silent erosion, a trade where you gave substance while they returned only shadows. This awakening did not turn you bitter, it turned you wise. Your compassion has not disappeared, but it has gained boundaries, structure, discernment. The recognition that not every request deserves a yes has become a shield, ensuring that your fire burns steadily rather than being scattered by those who never intended to nurture it. Your presence unsettles those who once believed they could lean on you endlessly without question. The moment you no longer moved automatically to meet their demands, irritation flickered across their faces like sparks of truth revealing their entitlement. What they mistook for loyalty was in fact your willingness to give, and once that assumption cracked, their real nature was laid bare for you to see. The discovery was jarring yet liberating. They had never been companions in struggle, nor allies holding equal weight. Instead, they had quietly fed on your willingness to overextend, treating your compassion like an open well that owed them water. When you drew the line, the facade shattered, exposing their dependence on the imbalance. Then came an unexpected reappearance, not from a stranger but from a familiar figure long absent. Their return carried a different vibration this time, as though they had been working in silence, reshaping themselves for a chance to reapproach you. What once was clumsy and unbalanced had been refined, a signal that they had realized half-hearted efforts would never suffice. This shift was not born from obligation but from necessity. They understood, perhaps better than ever, that pretense has no room where you stand. Any mask would fall apart the moment it tried to enter your atmosphere. The knowledge of this reality both beckons and unsettles them, for it demands that they meet you without disguise. What you carry is not a crafted image but a natural emanation. Without seeking to build a reputation, your consistency has already done it for you. Those who hear of you know instinctively, here is someone who cannot be misled, here is someone whose awareness burns through performance like morning light through fog. This clarity did not appear suddenly, it grew as you stopped dismissing what your instincts had always whispered. The subtle betrayals, the carefully staged dramas, the attempts to rewrite stories, all of them stood out more sharply once you decided silence was no longer your default. And so the performances ended, not because you demanded it, but because the act no longer holds power where you walk. Your refusal to ignore the obvious has transformed the stage itself, leaving only those who are willing to stand in the same light of truth that you have chosen to inhabit fully. The turning point has arrived where withholding your voice feels heavier than releasing it. Remaining quiet no longer preserves harmony, it corrodes it. In the middle of these shifting dynamics, new presences are gravitating toward you, drawn by the very qualities others have fled from. To them, your rawness is not a threat but a beacon. They are seeking a mirror that doesn't flatter illusions but reflects reality with sharpness and compassion. These are individuals who don't crave endless reassurance or fabricated comfort. They are searching for the friction that sparks growth, for the clarity that dissolves their own blind spots. Where some recoil from your discernment, they welcome it as nourishment. Among them stands a figure who once walked your path but drifted away, now returning with a different rhythm. They've been reshaping their own foundation, aware that half measures or surface-level gestures would collapse instantly in your presence. Their recognition is simple. The version of themselves that once approached you was unprepared for the depth you carry now. What they tried before, covering cracks with polished stories, masking doubts with bravado, hiding wounds beneath practiced smiles, would crumble the moment you looked deeper. That realization has sparked a more profound transformation than any lecture or confrontation could have forced upon them. They know that the only currency with value around you is sincerity. Your frequency has shifted so dramatically that performance feels brittle, like glass about to break. The atmosphere around you makes half-truths suffocating, forcing those who enter your circle to breathe in nothing less than full transparency. The contrast between your evolution and their old patterns became too glaring for them to ignore. And so, they began the work on their own. Not with promises or pleas, but with deliberate action. Piece by piece, they addressed the very weaknesses that once defined their disconnection. They stripped away habits of avoidance, strengthened their emotional core, and began dismantling the tendency to say what pleased instead of what was real. This preparation wasn't done for applause or immediate reward, it was born from an awareness that only honesty can survive in the gravity of your presence. Their return is not about reclaiming an old story but about aligning with the new resonance you embody, one where authenticity is the only language spoken. The light you carry has become an unspoken invitation for others to confront themselves. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence makes denial feel unbearable. Without lifting a finger, you've become the spark that ignites self-reflection in those around you. Some respond with courage, while others recoil into silence, afraid of what the mirror you hold might show them. One companion in particular has drifted into distance, not from disinterest but from fear. They recognized that you had pieced together the threads of their old habits, the cycles of drama, the constant bids for sympathy, the way every story placed them as the aggrieved. Their silence is not anger, it is the tremor of knowing that you could speak a truth they are not ready to face. For some, the pull is not rejection but curiosity. You've noticed it most vividly in professional spaces, where ordinary exchanges take on the quality of experiments. Every question you pose becomes a catalyst, not because you aim to expose, but because you refuse to accept surface-level responses. Your inquiries strip away assumptions, leaving only substance behind. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. This habit, so natural to you, unsettles the room. Where others let polished words pass unexamined, you lean in, asking for clarity, for reasoning, for evidence. What might look like confrontation is in fact integrity made visible. And while at first it sparks discomfort, over time it becomes a force that others lean toward, sensing the relief of conversations grounded in reality instead of performance. The ripple is undeniable. People who once clung to gossip now pause before speaking, checking whether their words hold weight. They are learning that truth has more gravity than appearances, and your consistency has silently raised the threshold for what can be said aloud. Not because you silence them, but because your example redefines what is possible. In your closest bonds, this shift is even sharper. That clash where you laid bare long-held observations was more than confrontation. It was a declaration that you will no longer collaborate in illusions. To dismiss deception now would mean betraying yourself, and that cost is too high. Honesty, even when jagged, feels cleaner than silence ever did. And though it has created rifts, it has also opened doors. The energy once poured into softening your insights for others is now fueling your own expansion, new ideas, deeper connections, richer creativity. Relationships that shrink from your authenticity fall away, making space for ones that grow because of it. What remains are people willing to live without masks, knowing your truth is not a weapon but an offering of compassion, a place where they can finally breathe without pretending. What you offer others is not comfort rooted in pretense but the rare sanctuary of being seen without disguise. To be recognized as they truly are, without embellishment, without distortion, is a freedom many have craved yet feared. It explains why some gravitate toward your presence like it's a lifeline, while others withdraw, unsettled by the very clarity that could set them free. Those aligned with growth perceive your candor as an opening rather than a threat. They understand that the truths you reveal are carried by a current of care, not condemnation. Yet, for those still committed to illusion, your presence feels like a dismantling of the scaffolding they've leaned on for years. Nowhere is this tension more pronounced than in the bonds of family, where long unspoken dynamics have finally been brought into the light. You have begun pointing to the cycles that were once the family's unspoken rules. The one who clings to rescue rather than responsibility, the one who edits memories to escape accountability, the inherited habits of manipulation cloaked as devotion. These recurring patterns, once left unchallenged, are no longer hidden. Naming them has sent ripples of shock through a system that relied on silence to survive. The reactions could not be more varied. Some erupt in frustration, urging you back into the role of the quiet one who smooths over conflict for the sake of appearances. Others exhale with visible relief, grateful that someone finally dared to acknowledge the fractures that have been there all along. Still others linger in hesitation, watching to see whether truth will fracture the foundation or rebuild it stronger. Yet this awakening is not confined to family ties. It has reached into your understanding of balance and fairness in every area of your life. The ways in which your openness has been taken advantage of are now glaringly clear. What once felt like small oversights now reveal themselves as entrenched patterns: favors never returned, spaces used without gratitude, needs taken for granted while your own went unnoticed. The clarity of these imbalances has shifted your generosity into something more refined. It's no longer blind giving, it's conscious contribution. Each time you name what has long been ignored, you reclaim energy that once leaked away through silent endurance. The revelations, while sometimes jarring, have been nothing short of liberating. And as you set these new boundaries, the responses reveal everything. Some push back, frustrated at the loss of easy access to your resources. Others adjust, rising to the new standard you've set. Through it all, you've learned that truth does more than expose, it recalibrates, reshaping every connection into something that can either withstand authenticity or dissolve under its weight. The reactions you've sparked have become a kind of compass, pointing directly to the character of those around you. Some lashed out, quick to accuse you of greed or self-interest, revealing more about their entitlement than about your intentions. Others looked startled, as though they had truly believed their habits of taking would go unnoticed forever. Yet there were also a few who, confronted with the truth, humbled themselves instantly and chose to adjust, proving that growth is possible when honesty is met with humility. Through these experiences, you've uncovered a vital truth about how people operate. Most aren't scheming villains, but many will stretch boundaries until someone calls them back. Your silence wasn't a form of love, it was a quiet surrender that allowed imbalances to thrive. Now, by naming the unfairness, you've actually created the conditions for people to rise higher, to meet you as equals rather than dependents. One presence in particular has been paying attention to this shift. The person resurfacing from your past understands that the path back into your life is not the same as it once was. They can't return with recycled excuses, unresolved conflicts, or their old evasions. Your clarity has become a living mirror, showing every gap between a person's words and their choices. That awareness has pushed them into real inner labor, not for your approval, but because denial became impossible in your light. They've been confronting what they used to avoid, untangling their finances, opening up emotionally, and practicing difficult conversations instead of sidestepping them. They've recognized that stepping into your orbit without this work would feel like dragging dead weight into a place that can only sustain authenticity. Still, they're not the only ones shifting under the pressure of truth. The friend who slipped into distance is also caught in their own reflection. Slowly, they're beginning to understand that your vision isn't sharpened to wound but to reveal. What they once interpreted as judgment is starting to look like care, though it terrifies them to imagine what real accountability will feel like. They want closeness, but they know it will demand a level of honesty they've never practiced before. Meanwhile, beneath all these personal reckonings lies a deeper recognition: the larger system itself is distorted. Narratives have been bent, voices suppressed, and entire structures engineered to keep people asleep. Yet through all of this, your heart refused to be numbed. That's why you endured when others gave up, why you stayed steady while the ground itself felt unstable. You've always sensed the fracture in the illusion. You noticed the cracks, the distortions, the subtle glitches that gave the game away. Others may doubt, but you've never lost touch with that knowing. And that inner compass, the refusal to bow to falsehood, has made you resilient enough to keep standing in a world designed to keep you silent. There are pathways of wisdom that were never meant for the masses, streams of knowledge carefully hidden so that only the persistent seekers would ever find them. What flows through you now is not ordinary learning, it is the remembrance of strategies, disciplines, and inner sciences that empower the few who refuse to be bent, erased, or silenced. This is not theory. It is the ignition of your real story, the one that begins when you reclaim what was always yours. As each thread of your journey weaves together, the larger tapestry is finally visible. What felt like isolated moments of clarity were actually the gradual tuning of your inner frequency. This shift isn't just about your personal transformation, it is a signal radiating outward, influencing everyone who comes near. Those who are ready accelerate, drawn upward by resonance, while those unwilling to adjust pull away instinctively. This is the truth of alignment. Some find your presence a catalyst for rapid expansion, while others recoil and choose distance. Either way, no one remains untouched. The flow of abundance you are experiencing now is not random, it is the natural result of closing the door on relationships that drained you and opening space for reciprocity to thrive. Every time your choices reflect your deepest values, you amplify this current. Consistency between what you believe and what you do turns you into a magnet for possibilities that match your integrity. The shift isn't only external, it's within. What used to exhaust you, the endless management of other people's discomfort, has been replaced by anticipation. Truth has become a source of energy instead of a burden. The solitude of noticing what others pretended not to see has dissolved into something brighter. Connection is now forming with those who share your devotion to clarity. Where there was once hesitation to speak, there is now trust in your ability to stand firm regardless of the reaction. That quiet confidence has transformed fear into steady strength. Even those from your past can feel the change. They see that this is not the same version of you they once knew. The distance of time has revealed their own unfinished work, and now they recognize that only by confronting it directly can they hope to step into your world again. This is no longer about seeking approval or validation. It is about stepping into the field of authenticity you've created, a field that transforms anyone who dares to enter it. What emerges now is not just new connections, but a new community built on the raw foundation of truth, where masks fall quickly and only what is real can last. They are approaching differently now, no longer hiding behind polish or pretense. Instead of rehearsed perfection, they are offering the rarest gift, showing up exactly as they are, flaws included. They know that only transparency can hold the weight of reconnection, and they are choosing to meet you on that ground. The friend who had pulled away is also preparing to step forward with new honesty. They've realized that the wall between you wasn't built by your perception but by their unwillingness to face themselves. For the first time, they are ready to admit the ripple effects of their choices, understanding that accountability is the bridge that can restore what distance had fractured. Most people walk through life with tunnel vision, filtering what they see to keep themselves comfortable. They notice only what fits their preferred version of reality, conveniently overlooking everything that might demand change. But your awakening dismantled those blinders. You now perceive the full spectrum, the patterns beneath words, the truths hidden in plain sight, the narratives people invent to suit themselves. This vision reaches into every connection, even the romantic ones. It reshapes dating into something far sharper and at times lonelier. You can recognize immediately when someone is performing rather than revealing. Within moments you sense the difference between practiced lines and authentic expression, and no amount of charm can conceal what isn't real. Inconsistencies stand out to you like thunder in silence. You detect when stories bend around omissions, when someone's attention ebbs and flows depending on what they're gaining, when tone and energy don't match the words being spoken. The one preparing to return to your life remembers vividly how effortlessly you exposed the cracks in their past facades. They recall the moments when your casual curiosity unraveled the scripts they had convinced themselves were true. They now understand that this time, no mask will hold. The only way forward is through radical self-honesty, not just in your presence but in every area of their own reflection. For months they have been immersed in a discipline they describe as truth training, combing through every corner of their life where denial once thrived. They've confronted uncomfortable realities, financial patterns, emotional barriers, long-ignored obligations, and faced them without the cushion of excuses. This work, though difficult, is the only preparation that makes a future connection with you possible. They've begun to look closely at how they show up emotionally, finally admitting the ways they used to shut down when conflict appeared or how they sidestepped meaningful discussions about needs and boundaries. Some relatives have leaned into this work with surprising eagerness, almost relieved to put long-avoided issues on the table at last. What was once unspeakable has become the starting point for a new kind of honesty. For the first time, exchanges are shifting from surface-level pleasantries to authentic dialogue. Instead of staged interactions designed to keep everything looking harmonious, family members are speaking openly about challenges, finances, mental health, addictions, disappointments. These conversations, once unimaginable, are now happening regularly, even though they shake the old foundations of what the family thought it was. The identities people clung to, the rescuer, the victim, the successful one, the failure, are being dismantled by straightforward questions that cut through story and demand clarity. Suddenly, assumptions about who carries blame or who deserves sympathy no longer stand unchallenged. What makes this even more powerful is how the younger generation is absorbing these changes. Children and young adults are witnessing that love and accountability can exist together. They are seeing firsthand that true care doesn't mean protecting harmful behaviors but addressing them directly. They're learning that loyalty isn't about silence, it's about the courage to bring light to what everyone can already feel beneath the surface. Alongside this transformation, your relationship with prosperity itself has been redefined. Abundance has revealed itself not as a measure of material accumulation but as the quality of the people you allow into your life. Real wealth is found in circles of integrity, where giving and receiving flow equally and where no one expects others to carry what they refuse to carry themselves. This shift has also demanded directness in situations you once let slide. The relative who repeatedly borrows and disappears without repayment, the companion who treats generosity as obligation, the coworker who piles requests while offering nothing in return. All of these patterns have come into sharp focus. Pretending not to notice them is no longer an option. When you've addressed these imbalances head-on, the responses have spoken volumes. Some resist, some deflect, and some finally step up to meet the standard you've set. Each reaction reveals not just who they are, but whether they belong in the next chapter of your life, where authenticity and reciprocity are no longer negotiable.